Hey, welcome back again, folks, to another episode of the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. Matt and I are here today. We have a guest on, Tim Ventrello from Lanessa Farms. He is going to tackle an episode here for us on getting started with sheep and goats. So glad to have you here, Tim.
Thanks so
Welcome to
much.
the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, as you said, my name's Tim Ventrello. I am from Northwest Indiana. So, basically, if you were to draw a line directly between Chicago and Indianapolis, I'm about right in the middle of that. Sheep and goat farming wasn't as big of a deal here as it probably is now. When I was growing up, I actually didn't grow up on a sheep farm. I actually started working for a farmer when I was a early teenager, maybe 12, maybe between 10 and 12 years old. And he actually had about 150 head of Cordale sheep. I grew up on a farm doing farm work, but that was kind of my first exposure to sheep. So worked for him all the way up until I was 18 years old, went through everything. He did rotational grazing, lambing, meds, kind of an old school kind of guy. And so I grew up exposed to that in the mid 80s through the late 90s. So it was a interesting time to be getting into livestock because a lot of things were changing as far as management strategies, um, medication strategies, things like that. Went off to the service, joined the military right out of high school, was gone for a number of years. I went in the service at a really interesting time. The 9/11 happened when I was a junior grade NCO, so that was magical. I got to travel all over the United States, though. I was in North Carolina, Alaska, Arizona, Texas. So I really got to see a lot of management practices across the United States, which still kind of kept my interest while I was active duty. Came home, got married, came home back to Northwest Indiana. And I told my wife, I said, let's buy a lamb to eat. And she's like, okay. So I went to a local farm and tried to buy a lamb. And when they told me how much they wanted for it, I almost fell out of my boots. So I told my wife, I said, hey, and this is famous talk for lots of people I know. I said, hey, honey, let's just buy 2 ewes and a ram. I'll get you started with this and we'll see how it goes. So now here we are, 15 years later, 20 years later, and now I've got, I don't even know. I guess if I had to go and count heads today, we're probably at over 100 between the sheep and goats. And we just started to kind of get into get into things. One of my daughters one day told me, she said, Dad, you've got customers calling all the time asking you questions about how to do things. Why don't you just make a YouTube video? And I said, I don't know anything about that. But I said, yeah, sure. If it'll save me some time, I'll do that. So I put out a few and then it just snowballed. And now, I mean, we're not big by any means. We're probably 4 million views, somewhere in that range. And I don't know, we've got a couple hundred videos out there. We have an online website. We've got a feed store that we run, and I'm a full-time medical person, and I also teach college level now. So it's kind of my side hustle. I finally retired from the military after 27 years last year. So you know how things happen. Things just kind of fall into place or out of place sometimes, and that's kind of where we're at now.
So is your sheep store, the feed store, is that related to the sheep and goats? Like, is
Yeah.
that kind of how you got into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the problem that we were running into is we were having a hard time finding some products specifically for sheep and goats. We're in a great location here because we're Purdue University, which is in Lafayette, Indiana. So we have a lot of really good animal nutritionists in the area that we were able to reach out to. And so we have some special medicated feeds specifically for sheep, specifically for goats, even more specifically for rams or lambs or kids. Same thing with the mineral side. And then we carry some coccidiostats, the big three: Decox, Bovatec, Rumensin, ammonium chloride, just some of those kind of hard to get that you can buy in a little bit smaller package. So that kind of took off on us as well. Yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
do you ship product out, or is it only like from the storefront?
No, we ship all over the United States. So that was one of the big hurdles to jump was how do I get concentrated stuff enough that I can package it up in anywhere from 10 to 40 pound packages and ship it to people. So most of our feed is meant to be added to a ration. So we're selling like really high protein feeds. We're selling like 40 to 45% protein rations. Our Ruments and Bovatec and Decox that we're selling is 10 pounds goes to a ton. And that's how we've kind of been able to go over that. So yeah, we ship all over the United States, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, we're all over the place. Now, Canada, man, if you want to see something that'll knock your socks off, try to ship a package to Canada and see how much it costs. I haven't figured that one out yet, but yeah, we're doing well.
Interesting. So you're working a full-time job.
Yeah.
Who's running the store?
So myself and my wife run the store. I also have people that'll come over and work with us as well. So it's a lot. This is not for the average person. I would say I'm kind of A plus plus personality. I would say if you drop me off in the forest with a saw, I would run around and cut down trees, and then I would set up a roadside wood stand. Like I'm that guy. So I don't golf, I don't gamble, I don't hunt. This is all I do. I wake up, I go to work, and then I work till it's time to go to bed. So I say it's my hobby that pays for itself, but I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's my best analogy I've got.
Well,
yeah, I just pulled up your website here while you were talking. So it looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I run the website. I did all the graphic design work. I mean, I'm a one man show. So yeah, it's been an interesting run, that's for sure. But I'm having a good time, And like I said, when we talk about people getting into sheep and goats, it's a great way to think about it. Think of it as a hobby. And if you can turn that into a hobby that helps at least pay for itself, maybe make a little bit of extra money. I mean, hey, that's great, man. It saves some money. You have a good time. You get to learn a lot. There's a lot of benefits that come to raising livestock. Definitely more than those tangible things we talk about, like money, and things like that. So,
sure.
Yeah.
What breeds of sheep and goats do you raise? I see on here it says that you have heirloom livestock.
Yeah, so that's a great question. When it comes originally when I started raising sheep, I went back to Poll Dorset. We have some really good standing breeds in Indiana, specifically from Hunter, that they've have really good genetics of Poll Dorset, very traditional Poll Dorsets, maybe not what you'd see in the club lamb shows now. Good mothering ability, breed out of season. It was an overall good pick for me. And then I originally got in with boar goats. Now, as the educational side started picking up, I started to get more and more questions, and so about different breeds. And so we started really reaching out and getting different breeds. So we have either now or in the past, we've raised lots. I've had Royal Whites, I've had Katahdins, I've had Dorpers, I've had wool breeds, I've had Columbias and Romneys, and if you name it, we've had it. And it's very difficult, but it's very interesting, because if you can mentally do that and have them segregated, you can really feel for what are the unique attributes of this breed versus this breed. How does this breed put on weight? How does this breed grow? And it's helped me moving through that. Now on the goat side, we've done Nigerians, we've done Alpines, we've done Oberhasleys, we've done Boers, Kikos. I finally ended up settling on a Boer, a kind of a three-way cross. I've got some Boer bred some dairy breeds into, because it upped the milk production. They just seem to do a little bit better mothering. So, it's been a learning process. I found some breeds along the way that I'm like, no, absolutely not. This is not for me. Recently with our sheep, we've gone as far as we have Velaeus Blacknose now, which I'm sure you guys may be familiar with. So we have some pretty high genetic Velaeus Blacknose. We just lambed a couple weeks ago. I've got some F4s on the ground now, so we're at that 96% rate. So it's interesting. That was one of the breeds I hadn't done, but I think we're going to see more of that breed in the future, and I kind of wanted to get my hands on it and see what that was all about. So that's been a expensive and interesting way to go with things. But yeah, we've had our hands on. We've brought sheep in from West Texas. We've brought sheep in from the mountains in Colorado. All over the United States. So it's been very interesting to see what works and what doesn't.
You have like a little testing ground set up almost.
Yeah. We keep very detailed records. We have detailed records on any animal that stepped foot on our property for probably the last 10 years, to include any medical stuff, any vaccinations, any problems, all that. And that's really the way we're able to make decisions when it comes to culling and making those decisions. We like to do blind culling, where we strictly go off of the paperwork side of it, as opposed to getting emotional attachments to these animals, which it's difficult sometimes.
Right. So let's dig into this, getting started with sheep and goats. And it's good that we have a goat expert on
Yeah,
here because,
Right. Go ahead,
we're
Matt.
a little weak on the goat side. Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, my was a little funky here, but I was gonna say let's use the breed topic to segue into our topic of the day. If I'm completely new to sheep and goats, and I know this is a loaded question with lots of different answers, but how do I start deciding which breed is the right breed for me?
Well, I think it's even more complicated than that. And we kind of touched base on that when I was talking about the Poll Dorset. I said, well, it's the Poll Dorset that's traditional, but it's not something you would see in the club realm now.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things that people really have to do when they're getting into sheep and goats is they have to decide, what the heck am I doing? It's really, really difficult to run a full show. That is to say, are you raising for commercial? Are you wanting to raise something that people are going to buy, and do at shows and 4-H and things like that? And then that leads you down the rabbit hole of, okay, now, what is it that I want to buy? So, a Southdown, people say Southdown, and it's an example of a sheep breed. They say Southdown, and then they say, well, what kind of Southdown are you talking about? We've got baby doll Southdown. We've got commercial Southdown that you might see shown in places like Western and Southwestern Texas. Then we have show, or commercial size Southdown. So that we've got all these different types and varieties. So it's not enough anymore to just say, I want to raise this breed. We need to know, what breed do you want to raise and what are you plan on doing with it? So that's important. Same thing that you run into with boar goats. So boar goats, as an example, we've got commercial boar goats, we got full blood boar goats. And as you start getting into these nuances of what do I want to raise, now you got to start looking at things like, do I need to belong to an association? Am I going to have to pay fees? Am I going to have them registered? So it really gets in the deep weeds there. So I think once someone can answer the question of, what do I plan on doing with these animals? Then they can go out and start educating themselves on which animal is going to give me what it is that I desire. How do those animals stack up against competition that I have in my area? How do those animals tend to perform in my geographical location? So, but I think first of all, you really got to be honest with yourself and say, what do I want to do with these animals? What's my long-term goal? And then you can start to move forward from there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of diversity within breeds across the board, really.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you were the kind of person that you knew you were just going into the commercial game, that is to say, I am raising these animals to sell them at market. You would want to ask yourself, at what weight do I want to sell these animals at? Now, that's going to depend on where you're located at within the world, within the United States. Different areas of the United States are going to want their lambs and their goats at a different weight based on who's the market, who's buying it. We have a lot of ethnic markets that are buying. They have very different tastes as far as what they want. We live near Chicago, so we have Greeks, other Eastern European areas that are buying from us. But then we have Michigan, where we may have more of Arabic descent that's buying from us. They want two totally different animals. They want them different weights. They want them different fat contents. And so that can be really difficult. So a lot of people ask me, they're like, well, how do I figure that out? Well, the best thing for you to do is to go to your local sale barn, the closest sale barn you can find to your location, and talk to them. And they're friendly people. They want your business. They want to help you sell. And they will tell you, they will say, this is the time of year that you want to bring them in. This is the weight that you want to bring them in. A lot of people look at sale barns and say, oh, I don't want to deal with a sale barn. I'd rather sell it off my property, or I'd rather do this, or I'd rather do that. From an economic standpoint, bringing people together and having them compete for a price, it generally helps the price go up. And the sale barn wants you to do well, because the more you make, the more they make. So that's a very undervalued tool, is people reaching out to these sale barns and asking them what sells, what doesn't sell. Because you might have it in your mind like, oh yeah, I'm going to sell. And then you talk to the sale barn and they're like, no, you're not. They may also change up, when do you want them to lamb? When do you want them to kid? So lots of stuff that can go into that, but a very good resource for people that are thinking about specifically on the commercial side of raising sheep and goats. Talk to that local sale barn and see what they're going to tell you.
Sure. And if you did want to sell privately off your farm, the basics would be this: find that market, ask them what they want, and then produce it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so we don't sell much privately off the farm anymore. We used to. We had quite a few people that would come to us from Chicago and other areas that would buy from us. But I look at sale barn reports every week, and I know what they're moving for in my location. So when someone comes out to my farm to buy from me, I'm not letting that animal go for less than it would sell at the sale barn. Like, it may sound kind of ruthless, but really, if you're going to do this and you expect to make anything out of it, you can't be giving animals away. You can't be leaving money on the table. To be honest with you, I take them to the sale barn, I drop them off, I get my ticket, and I go home. They mail me my check in the mail. I don't have people no call, no show. I don't have people come to my house and try to beat me up over price. I get what the market demands. And I tell people that when they come out to my farm, they say, how much are you going to charge me, Tim? And I said, I don't know. We're going to see what the market price is at the time that you come out there. Now, if they call me a week out or something, I can tell them it's going to be this much off the hoof. But if they're calling me and saying, I want to come out in a month, what are you going to charge me? I'm like, man, I wish if I knew the answer to that, I'd be in pretty good shape. So generally speaking, going to the sale barn, people are going to take their animals in there. They're going to get sorted up into groups, and they're going to sell them. Generally speaking, they're going to sell them based on weight. Sometimes they will sell them per head. It just depends. But the sale barn will do everything for you. They'll package them up, they'll auction them off, and then they'll mail you the check in the mail. Take a small commission off of it. But really, it's very convenient, and I'm a pretty big fan of it myself.
Yeah, I find that too. I find many of the people that do sell off the farm are often undervaluing their animals, especially if they're selling for a certain holiday where they want a certain type of animal. If you send them to the sale barn, they're going to have to fight over them. If they come out to your farm, they're really going to dicker with you to pay that same price. So I find that.
Well, you're taking that conflict away from yourself and you're putting
Yeah.
it on them. If they want to go fight over it at auction, that's fantastic. Go bicker with
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
But it beats the heck out of having one person with you face to face on your farm. And then you start having feelings like, oh man, if I don't sell this, I just wasted all this time. And now what am I going to do? And some of these people are ruthless, man. Like it's no hold barred. They're coming out and they're not giving you what you want. And so I would tell people, if you're not good, I would tell people to think about the sale barn regardless. But I
Sure.
would also tell people, if you're not good with negotiating, if you're not good with confrontation, selling animals right off your farm, I don't care if you're selling it for retail, I don't care if you're selling it for show, like you better get over that. Or maybe that line of work may not be for you. Doesn't mean you shouldn't raise sheep and goats. It just means that specific kind of niche may not be the thing you want to do.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah. We talked about making that mental decision and looking at our research and saying, hey, what is it that I want to bring to the farm and why do I want to do it? I think once you get that done, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is, where are you getting your information from? Man, sheep and goat world, there's a whole lot of people out there with a whole lot of information. Everybody's kind of got their thing. Some people are big into making you money. Some people are big into animal health. I wouldn't say that any of them are necessarily right or wrong. There are some very strong opinions out there. I think if you're going to look up general knowledge-based questions about sheep and goats, you can't ever go wrong with what we call scholarly work. So when I talk about scholarly work, what I'm saying is, go to universities. We're blessed in the United States. We've got really, really good university information out there. We've got University of Michigan. We've got Cornell. We've got Oklahoma. We have lots of valuable stuff that's out there. And when you're reading it, you're getting at least fairly accurate information. You get a lot of the opinion work out of that. You start going on forums and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but what you'll notice is these forums kind of fall into little groups, and they're like, we're a boar goat group, we're a club lamb group, we're this or that. You go to 5 different forums, you're going to get 5 different answers. You say, well, what do I want to do? And they're going to say, maybe here's a potential customer, maybe, whatever, this is my personal opinion. I'm sure if I said, if you said, what kind of goats should you get? My answer might be different than you guys. So I think restraining yourself to that scholarly work, at least up front, is a really good way to go. And I also think people have to have realistic expectations about things. It may not be the popular thing to say, but if you think you're going to go out and pick up sheep or goats, you're going to bring them home, throw them in a fenced-in area, water them once a day, and forget about it, life's going to be really hard for you. And it's unfortunate that that's kind of some people think that that's the way it goes. And unfortunately, these are animals that can really try you as far as keeping them healthy, at least for a while, until you get them dialed in and you get where you need to be.
Do you have any particular websites that you like to send people to, aside from your own?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So about our website, and I'm not avoiding your question, I'm getting there. I don't try. I do my review work prior to putting out a video, prior to making a statement, whatever. I always encourage people in some of our videos and people that listen to me talk, I say, there's nothing wrong with asking. So if I get on here today and I say, you need to do this, and that person says, why? And I can't answer that question, we've got a problem here. If my answer is, well, because so-and-so told me, well, who is so-and-so? Is so-and-so Dr. Woody Lane, who's, got a doctorate in animal nutrition and science, or is this somebody told me on a forum? So I do my review work through scholarly work, through Merck Veterinary Manual, through other things before I get on there and I make a blanket statement because I I think part of doing this kind of work is you kind of get imposter syndrome a little bit. Sometimes you think to yourself, you're like, man, maybe I don't know as much as I think I know, or um, I don't ever want to put myself in that position where somebody says why and I can't give them a reference of somewhere that they should go. So, um, Cornell's a very good place to get information. Um, Oklahoma State is a good one. Ohio State is a good one. There's a couple universities really across the board that are really good. Now, um, there are some books that are out there that I'm a pretty big fan of. The Merck Veterinary Manual. I'm a medical guy, been through graduate school and all that. So I live the world of reading medical manuals and going through this. I can tell you the average person out there, you give them a Merck veterinary manual and they start reading that, they're like, their mind's blown and they're gone. There are some pretty good books that are out there. Pipestone's Veterinary Guide to Sheep and Goats is a very easy read, very good read. That was originally produced through Dr. Kennedy, who's no longer with us, but there are some things out there. So I would say I go to the universities, I go to the vet manuals, the most up to date ones I can get, and that's kind of where I go.
Yeah, I really like that Pipestone vet guide. It's how would you say it? Maybe basic or very relevant. Everything that's
Yeah.
in there. If you have sheep or goats, soon enough you're going to encounter in
Mhm.
some way, shape, or form. So that's a really great for, especially for beginners and especially for commercial minded producers, because it's like a lot of the solutions to the problems are scalable.
Yes.
Um, where about some of your other sheep and goat disease books, you have 100 different diseases that you'll never see, and the solutions aren't always very applicable in a commercial setting. So,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely, absolutely. So Dr. Kennedy used to have a blog that he would do, and he had all that on. And so what they did was they took all of his blog posts and they put them together into that. And so when you're reading it, it kind of reads like a blog. You got little
yeah,
sections, very bite-sized chunks that you can do, and it's very easy. I think if you, that's the number one book that I tell people. If you're thinking about getting started with sheep and goats, buy that. I mean, it's probably less than $30, and if you can absorb that, um, you're in a fairly good spot. The other thing people have to think about when they're getting into sheep and goats is they need to think about resources. So and by that I'm talking about veterinary resources. A lot of things have changed in the United States over the past few years. When I was a kid, I could go to the store and I could pick up almost anything. And then we had things roll through. We had veterinary feed directives come through with oral antibiotics, talking about medications like aeromycin, which is tetracycline, things like that. And now, recently, within the last year and a half, all the antibiotics have come off the shelf. So, LA 200, penicillin, all of these things are no longer an option for us. So, people have to know, where can I get medications? And so I tell people, before you do anything, or at least soon after, I would prefer before you do anything, I want you to look and see, where's your closest vet and where's your closest vet that'll actually work on sheep and goats. If you can't find one local, do you have one that will work with you from a distance? And I tell people, I say, establish a relationship with your veterinarian now. Do not wait until it's Saturday afternoon in a snowstorm and you've got a baby and try to pick up the phone and call people. Most veterinarians will tell you, this is our after hours number. If you have a problem, you call me. And just having that peace of mind can save you a lot of heartache. And that's going to save you from doing weird stuff like, I'm having this problem. I'm going to jump on this forum with a lot of people I don't know, and I'm going to get people to throw information at me. And I don't know if it's right or if it's not. Plus, if you don't have any meds, you've got other problems. So raising sheep and goats It really honestly is a prepare for the worst, hope for the best kind of a situation. Within reason, we don't want people going out and spending $2,000 on veterinary supplies, but I think there are some staple things that you need to have on the farm for sure.
What would some of those staple items be? And I think we could look at it from a commercial sheep flock. Somebody that's looking to get into sheep, maybe starting with 30 or 50 head, not just starting with five. What would be some staple must-have things that they need before their sheep even show up?
Yeah,
Or as their sheep show up and they're ready for that first lambing.
yeah, so I think a lot of these supplies you can go across the board with sheep and goats, and really, regardless of if you're doing commercial or if you're doing show stock, whatever, you're going to see the same problems rear their head throughout the year. If I had to, you know, pick out five main things you're going to see throughout the year. One of the first ones you're going to deal with is you're going to deal with scours. So when we say scours, we talk about diarrhea. It comes and it goes. It depends. It can be caused by many different things. But there are some main things that are going to cause scours. You're either going to be dealing with a protozoa that we call coccidia. Coccidia aren't worms, but they have some negative effects on sheep and goats. Coccidia is a huge one. We have general parasites such as worms. We also have other parasites. People sometimes think, well, parasites are worms. Well, no. You've got nasal bots, you've got liver flukes, you've got lice, you've got mange, you've got kids. A lot of our problems that we deal with scours, though, are going to be gastrointestinal worms, probably most specifically the barber pole worm, which everybody hates to even say that word out loud. It's like Beetlejuice, you just don't want to say it too many times. So we're going to deal with scours. You have to have your head wrapped around that, and then those little nuances that go into that. So we talk about, can I treat for coccidia? Can I treat for worms? Can I treat for bacterial infections that are causing scours? So scours are a good one. You would be looking at worming medications, which could be there's a lot. We could have a whole discussion about worming medications.
Sure.
Different wormers for different types of worms, white worms versus other worms. Coccidia has its own specific medications. And then gastrointestinal scours, you're really looking at oral antibiotics, which would be something like Spectam, something like that if you're dealing with like E. coli or something like that. So we got scours. That's one of the big ones that we want to be prepared to deal with. Generalized infections. Is an animal suffering from some type of an infection, and do I have any antibiotics on hand that can treat that? In the world of sheep and goats, we've got some real general meds that we like to give as far as antibiotics are concerned. I would say you could pretty much say we're going to have penicillin, we're going to have LA200 or 300, which is oxytetracycline, and then we're going to have Draxxin. Draxxin's kind of a new one on the market. It's more of a long-acting, more expensive one, but between those three antibiotics, you could pretty much take care of darn near anything that pops up on the farm. With that being said, thermometer is your best friend. If I had to tell people what's something you absolutely want me to have, I'm gonna say I want you to have a darn thermometer, because the first thing that somebody calls me and says my sheep or goat's acting off, one of the very first things I say to them is it running a temperature? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, get out there and take a temp, and we can help you narrow things down a little bit more. So we've got the scours, we've got the generalized infections, wounds. You got generalized wounds that happen. They run into things. They do weird things that you never thought that they would do in a million. You just go out and you're like, you got this big cut on your side. What'd you do? And your goat's looking at you like, I just thought I was going to climb that tree, or, whatever. So you have to be prepared for generalized wounds. So basic things like, sprays, antiseptic sprays, just to keep on hand. Now, I do a lot of suturing, but I suture for a living. So what I would tell people is they sell staplers that are veterinary. You can buy them online. They're veterinary staplers. If you can use a stapler, you can use it. It looks like a little gun. You squeeze the handle. That can come a long ways to help deal with wounds and things like that as well. Most of these animals are pretty thrifty when it comes to wound. They have a generally higher body temperature that makes it a little bit harder for them to get infections, and they generally heal up fairly well. So we've got worms, we've got bacterial infections, we've got general wounds and things like that. And then you run into things like vaccines. Do I need to vaccinate? Should I vaccinate? When should I vaccinate? And that's a whole nother can of worms there as well. You have personal protective equipment that you need. You need to have things like gloves on hand. I don't want to see anybody out there guilty as the next person, but I tell people, if you can glove up before you're dealing with these animals, that's a good thing to do. And then if we start getting into, then we could really go in the deep weeds and say, you got nutritional stuff that you got to keep in mind. And then we've got lambing and kidding stuff we need to keep in mind. And that can open up a whole nother basket of supplies and things that you would need to do. But I think if you've got your wormers, you've got your antibiotics, you've got you're dealing with wounds, and you have your personal protective equipment, I think that's a great place to start.
So your thing of asking people if a sheep runs a temperature, that's an interesting thing right there, because I kind of have my normal rundown. People send me a picture of this sheep and it's, stretched out, kicking. My sheep acts like it's dying. What's wrong?
Yeah.
And I'm always like, where's the rest of the information?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What's its life cycle? Like, is this a ewe that is going to could lamb next week? Or is it a ewe that just did lamb? And what's really rewarding is when you have some people that you're working with, coaching, and they start catching on and they start learning the drill. And instead of them sending the picture, say, what's wrong with my sheep? They say, I have a sheep we just weaned lambs, and this lamb is so many days old. It's eating this. We just switched feed, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, it's so much easier. We can rule this out. We can rule that out. And they might even say, we just dewormed last week, or I already did a FAMACHA scoring on it. And I'm like, great. Well, I don't have to ask all these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't just go off a presentation. So, when we see humans, it's a multi-process step. When you go in to see your doctor, they're doing history of present illness, which is you tell them what's wrong. And then we're doing review of systems, which is what do we see, kind of what are they telling us? And then we do the physical exam. So you really got to gather a lot of information to make up your mind. Using neurological symptoms as an example, you could have an animal that has neurological symptoms. They can have hind hoof dragging. They can be seeing stars. They can be going in circles. They can do all this. Well, shoot, it could be a thiamine deficiency. It could be listeria. It could be meningocele worm. It could be, there's a whole slew of things. So yes, I always tell people the more information you have on hand, the better. And I try to coach people with that when they contact their veterinarian. I'm like, help yourself save some money and some time, and have all your ducks in a row before you call the vet. It'll also help you from annoying the vet as well. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand. And you can go both ways on this. When we talk about getting started with sheep and goats, I would say the more you learn to do yourself, the more money you're going to save. It can cost you a ton of money if you've got to call the vet out every time. I call the vet. I've got a couple of vet friends that I still have to call the vet. I have stuff that pops up that I'm like, man, I have no idea what's going on with this. So everybody needs a vet, but there's also things like, I'm not hiring the vet to come out to my farm to give vaccines. I'm not hiring the vet to come out to my farm to give a shot. It's not happening. I don't have that kind of money. So, and that's part of the fun of this too, though, is we talked about, there's no fun in buying sheep and goats and throwing them out on pasture and just looking at them once a day and giving them water. At least not to me. Part of the fun is learning something new, learning a new skill, having something that you can show your kids. You can bring a lot of this into your kids, teaching them with math and science and all kinds of stuff. So this really does have a lot of benefits. So part of that is education. Part of this is education. And I find that the people that really enjoy it the most are the people that really enjoy learning.
Yep.
I think that's a huge part of it. So yeah.
Yeah. That skills thing is definitely something I've been thinking about a lot recently here is this is really a thing that if you're going to do well with sheep and goats, there's a skill set that you have to learn. And a lot of we can crunch the numbers all day, but a lot of your profitability is actually going to come with how skillful you are in managing these animals. And um, if you have a border collie, you can go out and you can move a couple hundred ewes by yourself in a matter of a couple minutes, no problems. If you don't have a border collie, you might need 4 or 5 people to help you, and then you're not going to move them when you should, probably because you have to find people to help you. That's the same with even like you were saying, like giving shots or something like that, or it might go a day or so till the vet can get out there. So if you have antibiotics on hand, it's something you know what it is and how to treat it. You might be able to save that ewe's life versus to if the vet has to come out, it might be too long. So definitely something that if people want to get into it, like you said, you have to be interested in learning that skill set.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that we see people get into is I say, well, why do you want to do this? And they say, I want to make money. I'm like, man, there's a lot better ways to make money. No,
but they're not near as fun. But they're not near as fun.
and that's the part. And you're absolutely right. That's the part of it too, though, is it should be fun, and like Matt was saying, if you can save one of their lives, I'll tell you what, for people that get sheep and goats, you don't have to, but I would advise you have to go out there and walk every day and you have to see your animals. You'll get a feel for what is normal for them. And if you catch a sheep or a goat that's down and out, like they're down and they can't stand, you're in big trouble. But what you'll notice is as you get used to seeing those animals, you'll start to pick up. You'll be like, you know what, that one's acting a little off. Something you can intervene before it turns into a big deal. But again, that's part of the fun too, is going out there. They all have different personalities, they're fun. Sheep aren't, in my opinion, and I love sheep, I got sheep, but sheep aren't as much fun as goats. Goats tend to have personalities and you'll get some goofballs in there and they do funny things. Sheep, they're okay. But that's another thing that people have to ask themselves is, what's my family look like? That's a huge one. Just popped in my head. So, hey, are you the type of person that goes on 6 cruises a year? Are you the type of person that likes to winter in, maybe a warmer southern state, something like that? This will change your life, okay? I'm getting ready to go on vacation this year, and I think it's the first time I've been in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Now, my wife goes all kinds of cool places with the daughters and stuff, but that's part of the name of the game. Like, you can't just decide, I don't feel like doing this for a few weeks. It doesn't work. So you need to kind of look at things, see what's going on with the kids, see what's going on with you. I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm getting sheep and goats because they're a whole lot safer, and I've got kids that are 3 and 4 years old. Man, sheep and goats will clobber you. I've been knocked square out of my boots a few times. And is that the norm? No, that's not the norm, but they're still dangerous, and you need to respect them, especially when we start talking about our males. They can be fine 360 days a year, and you go out there on the wrong day and make the mistake of turning your back on them, and they will knock you clean out of your boots. So I think your lifestyle has some bearing on what it is you decide you want to do as well.
Yeah. I think that's a big one. I mean, people ask me, should I get into sheep or goats? The first question usually I ask is, do you want to be a shepherd? If you don't want to do that, like you said, there's easier ways to make money. We can make money with sheep or goats, but there's probably easier ways to do it. And so if it's not something you want to do, not something you want to, not a skill set you want to learn and apply yourself to, go do something else. You're not
Right.
going to do well in this business.
Well, and we always want to have animal welfare in mind too, like I don't want to see somebody. Oh man, I see some horror stories. I've seen them, I've heard them. Where I've gone to a farm and I mean the animal, it looks like it's dying, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, I don't know. I brought them home. I threw them out here. I'm like, what are you feeding them? Not really feeding them anything. They're just eating, using that as an example. There's plenty of things that can go wrong, but
Yeah.
I don't want to see, I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see people get into it and then decide they don't have their heart in it. And then the animal is the one that pays the price for it. So yeah, it can be interesting. And the other thing is you got to know thyself, right? So are you a super sensitive person? Are you the kind of person that once this animal comes to your house, it's going to stay at your house until it dies? A huge part of raising a successful flock or herd is we call it culling. When we talk about culling, we're not talking about going out and killing the animal. People think that what we're talking about is moving animals off the farm and maybe moving them somewhere else. Maybe they are going to butcher, but maybe they're going to another farm, or maybe they're, you're selling them to the neighbor or whatever. But that's a process that you have to go through as your flock or herd grows, is you got to get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. And getting the wrong people off the bus can be really, really hard sometimes, because you're like, oh, they're so sweet and I really like them. And the kids gave it a name. But that's a part of it. A part of being successful when it comes to raising sheep and goats is that ability to, if you want to have a few pets, then just have a few pets. But if you want to look at making money with it, culling and making those hard decisions is something that you have to be willing to do, or you will pay for it horribly, horribly bad.
It's the only way to move forward genetically.
Yeah.
How does that work with your valet's back nose?
So
they gotta be the hardest.
they are, and I can give you a prime example with them. So people don't know the black nose valet are a breed up program. That is to say, we have ewes and we're artificially inseminating them, and then we're trying to keep re-inseminating these F2s, F3s, F4s. It's kind of in the deep weeds, but so when we start breeding, and what you'll hear across the United States when we talk about mixing breeds together, you'll hear the term called hybrid vigor. And what hybrid vigor is it's kind of like when you think of a mutt, a mutt dog. Sometimes people say, man, those mutts are healthier than the full breeds. Well, yeah, you've got genetics that haven't been together for a very long time. We're reintroducing them to each other. And there is a real scientific thing that's called hybrid vigor. Some things get brought out that maybe weren't out before. We have less risk of recessive kind of bad genes that we don't want to see. And so it is very interesting when we see these first generation black nose valet that it maybe have just been crossbred. We've got maybe a Scottish blackface that's been artificially inseminated with a valet, and the babies come out and they are 12, 14 pounds. They get out of mom running around playing soccer already, and they're ready to go. And as we breed more and more and more, we notice a few things are happening. The babies are getting smaller. The birth weight isn't quite as big. Maybe they're not quite as thrifty. Now, I don't know. I'm not an expert, and I'm sure somewhere right now there's a black nose valet person that's having a stroke listening to me say that. But to me, that makes sense, because what I'm doing is I'm taking all that hybrid vigor and I'm doing away with it. I'm breeding back into that breed and breeding back into that breed. And I would naturally expect to see less hybrid vigor every time. So that's where you're right. If you get into a specialty niche where you've got a very, very unique breed of sheep where there aren't a lot of genetic pools out there, you can really, culling can get extremely difficult for you. I would go as far as to say in some cases it almost gets impossible, unless you've got something really wild like a ewe or a doe that just can't get pregnant, or you've got some kind of degenerative recessive genetics. But oh yeah, a lot harder. And so that's another thing people need to think about as well is what is the availability of this? Some people will say, oh, well, I want to get into this breed because there's no one within 500 miles of me that has this. Okay, that's fine, but you need to realize that when you need to start bringing in new genetics into your flock, there's no one around you for 500 miles. And that genetic pool starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Case in point, if you go back and look at the boar goats when they were first brought into the United States, I was reading an article, though that first group of boar goats, when they traced back their lineage, there was one buck that was like, I don't want to quote it here, but I'm going to say it was something like 80% of the genetics could be traced back to one like super nice buck that they had. So yeah, the gene pool can get shallow, and I don't need to tell people. We've all seen enough movies to know when the gene pool gets super shallow, we start running into some problems. So yeah, great point.
And the breed you're working with there with the black nose, that's a pretty tight gene pool here in U.S.
Oh yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very tight gene pool in the U.S. And then what you're doing is your semen that you're importing, you're limited as to what you can get. So I think once the breed up gets going, and which it is, there are farms that have 100%, or you never get to 100%, but they have quote unquote purebred rams on their farms now. I think as it grows, if it does, we're gonna see things kind of start to get better. But until we start getting more and more diversity, like yeah, it's an interesting run into, that's for sure. You see the same problem with people that want to raise for club lambs or club goats. There'll be a really hot buck or a really hot ram out there, and everybody and their brother will be going out and buying semen from that. And the next thing you know, everybody's got, you see it on the for sale boards. They're like, oh, well, this is out of so-and-so. I don't pay too much credence to that. I care more about what they look like. I care more about other things before you tell me who they come out of. But it does happen. People want to win. We had one of our bucks win the county fair, and then the next year I had everybody and their brother calling me that wanted to buy a kid from me because people want to win and they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Backing up just a little bit to our discussion about people, about the health aspect of things and people being able to identify problems and stuff. We hear a lot that sheep and goats hide health problems. They can hide something for so long until it's pretty bad. And that can be a problem for new producers. Mm-hmm. Because they need to learn to identify those things. I mean, I think all of us here been around sheep long enough that after a while we might say, well, it's obvious, but there's still things that I will see come up and I know something's wrong, and it takes me 3-4 days until I put my finger on it. And then I'm like, you know what? Why didn't I think of that before? It's everything's pointing toward this or that. So I had a producer just recently call me or message me and said, can a full-grown ewe just die for no reason at all? And he's probably gonna be listening to this, but that's all right. He doesn't have to take any offense. Nobody knows who he is.
Oh.
And right away I'm thinking like, yeah, I've had sheep die that I didn't know why it died. Mm-hmm. It's happened, but boy, not usually. You don't have a sheep just die for no reason at all.
Right.
And then he told me as the conversation progressed, he said, yeah, I was bringing him in the other day and I thought something was off with that one. Something was off just a little bit. And, I should have called it, and I'm supposing he probably would have went over his checklist. I mean, if it was me, the sheep are coming off pasture, I probably would have checked its inner eyelids, to look like it has parasites, and just start checking some boxes to try and rule out some things. And so, yeah, he's a new shepherd. He was a dairy farmer, but it's good. He picked up something. Now the problem is he didn't do something about it right away. But there's a good chance that maybe he would have been too late anyway.
Right.
But you have to learn to tune into those very subtle signs. That animal that's lagging behind, usually there's a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's bred into them. It's a survival instinct with sheep and goats. You know, back in the day, the sick ones that weren't keeping up were the ones that got eaten. And so they can hold it together for quite a long time. And then when they start to fall apart on you, they fall apart pretty quick. Some things, like you said, it's not going to matter if you catch it or if you don't. By the time you catch it, it may be too late. A lot of times, if we see an animal that's down to the point that they can't even stand, you're in big trouble.
Right.
Percentage wise of them coming out of that are pretty slim. You know, I have a lot of resources because of my knowledge base, my skill set, and things like that. I've had animals that I've gone as far as I've got IV antibiotics running, I've got a fluid, they still die sometimes. And there's some things that just happen quick. You look at things like listeria, you know, they get into bad silage. You look at things like cherry tree bough falls off of a tree and hits the ground, and now they eat it and it poisons them. I mean, weird stuff can happen. And so, like you said, a lot of that goes into the longer you do it, the more you see. And then the next time that happens, you're going to be like, aha, I've seen this before, or this looks similar to what I've seen. And it's not all on you either. You know, part of this, again, we talked about the fun of this. You know, part of the fun of this is building relationships with other people that do the same thing you do. So over time, you're going to establish a rapport with other people, and you're going to be able to call your buddy and you're going to be like, hey, man, I see this is happening. What do you think? You know, and you can bounce things off of each other. And we do that all the time. I have individuals that I talk to all the time, and I'm like, hey, man, I don't even know. I've never seen this before. And, you know, I reach out to my friends and we talk about it, and we go from there. So that's a big part of it too. Ideally, perfect world, if you were going to get into sheep and goats, I would say if you can find a mentor in your area that you can work with, that's a great way to do it. And especially if if they do what you want to do specifically. You know, if you want to raise club sheep and club goats, do they raise club sheep and club goats? If you want to raise commercial, I don't know if a club sheep and club goat guy or gal might be the one to talk to, but it's better than nothing. But kind of talk to people, because, you know, we talk about geographical locations. We have geographical locations throughout the United States where certain things tend to happen at certain times of the year. You know, you get into cold environments like we have here in Indiana. We run into a lot of listeria issues in the springtime. Look at our friends in the southern states, man, the parasites. I mean, give me a break. It never gets warm. It never gets cold enough there to kill stuff. So you get into like-minded individuals. They tend to see things that tend to happen in their area a little bit better, I would think. So you're kind of borrowing knowledge from a friend, I guess, is the best way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that mentor piece is a big deal, because like we lightly skimmed over, well, you need nutrition, you need to think about medicine, you need to think about, and even if we do an hour-long podcast on any one of those topics, it's still, there's such a variation across, you know, different farms, depends where you're at. So yeah, if you can find someone in your area that's doing something even similar to what you're doing is going to be huge. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's going to be really overwhelming to get started and to pull a program together.
Absolutely. I think some people might watch a video where it says, you know, getting started with sheep and goats, and they're thinking, oh, this guy's going to teach me all about wormers and all about antibiotics and all about that. No. And hopefully this has kind of been eye-opening for people, because there's a whole lot of things you got to think about before you ever even get to that point. You know, this should not be an impulse buy for somebody. You should not wake up today and go to a sheep farm and buy a sheep tomorrow and have like 2 days thinking about it, you know, or a goat farm. There's a lot of things that should go into it. You know, a lot of questions you need to ask yourself. You know, you need to set expectations. You need to decide if it's right for you. You need to try to find a mentor. That's the stuff that comes first. You're going to learn about worming. You're going to learn about antibiotics as those things come up and as you start educating yourself. But before you get there, a whole lot of things that maybe a lot of people don't think about that should definitely cross your mind for sure.
Yeah, it's very definitely hard to, we can't cover near everything. I mean, I just thought of now, like we could have a whole episode on housing requirements.
Oh yeah.
And there again, there's so many variables. If you're in the South, you might not need a building.
Right.
If you're where I am, where we get the snow, lake effect snow, you're going to want a building. It just depends what you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. We get individuals that, or we've had individual goats. I can tell you where it's 20 below zero outside and our lambs are fine. And the kids will freeze to the ground and die before you even get out there. I mean, there's a huge, what kind of breed? You get a breed like some of these Columbia, Rambouillet, stuff like that are coming off a heli ranch out in Montana. Shoot, those things will drop babies in the snow and sleep in the snow and they're fine. And then, I get some of these Dorpers that I've brought in from West Texas and it ain't happening, man. It depends. There's a lot that goes into it. Again, a Dorper that I get from West Texas may not have the same genetics as a Dorper that I get here that's been more acclimated to it. So, there's different nuances as well. It's real hard to pigeonhole breeds and to say, oh, well, all Dorpers are this, all Katahdins are this, or so on and so forth. I don't buy that. I think there's lots of different, nuances within breeds across the United States for sure.
I would really like to dive into that breed thing with you, but maybe we'll have to do that on another episode because that could get long. And I'm sure we'd be sure to offend someone along the way somewhere.
Yeah,
that would be an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, when I've done live streams in the past, I've invited people on that were like, I can't do it. Like, I mean, honest to goodness, I have friends that are like, can't do it, man. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, I can't. It's so bad that bringing people on, I wanted to find people that would look at a show animal and say, this is good, this is bad, just basic stuff. People are like, no way, dude, I'm not going to do it because they don't want it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to get involved in it. So yeah, there's a political side to it to a certain degree, but yeah, I think people need to understand that just because it says it comes from a certain farm doesn't mean that it's good. Just because it's a certain breed doesn't mean that it's good. There's a lot of different things that you can look at when it comes to that. So, yeah.
Hey, this has been very interesting.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap this up?
No. I know one of the key things that I had in the back of my mind that we really didn't get into, and it kind of gets in the deep weeds a little bit, but just to kind of piggyback off of, getting that mentor and getting people in your area that I generally tend to tell people when you buy animals, when you bring animals in, you need to try to hit as close to the target as you possibly can. So, if you want to raise for commercial, just because that show animal looks really, really good, it's probably not going to work. We need to keep like animals for our goals. The other thing that I especially with new people that are a little bit underexperienced, is I tell them, if you can find what you want, try to get it from as close to your geographical location as possible. We talked about these different parasites and different genetic propensities for things. I think there is some benefit to be said for that. So, for instance, if Matt has some Katahdins and Matt lives 2 miles from me, and there's some guy that lives in 3 states away and he has Katahdins that might look a little bit better, I'm still probably going to be a little bit more apt to buy from Matt because there's so many things that go into their health and to exposure with things like parasites. The closer I can get to my geographical location, the better off generally that we are. And the better, results we're going to have. So that's something for people to keep in mind, I think, as well.
As you get into that more, like once you have your flock established, and I'm a seed salesman.
Okay. So right up your alley then, yeah.
But my point is, as you get your flock established more and more, it is harder and harder to go out and buy sheep. Come to my farm, buy the best sheep I have. If your flock's very well established, they might not be better than yours. You know, even though I'm putting a lot of time and money into raising the best sheep for my farm, your farm might be different. Your sheep are used to your management, to your challenges, all that. So, and it kind of goes hand in hand with, you know, buying sheep local to you. It's probably your safest bet.
Yeah, every farm's going to have its own unique issues. For some farms, it's going to be parasites. For some farms, it's going to be hooves. For some farms, it's going to be teat structure. For some farms, it's going to be fill in the blank. And so when you're looking at bringing new livestock into your farm, especially when we talk about our males, you can screw things up in a hurry. People kind of poo-poo males, especially younger people that are new to sheep and goats, kind of poo-poo males sometimes, and I don't really know why, because you're looking at bringing in a single animal that's going to contribute to 50% of your genetics. That dude, you better spend some time looking at that guy. I can get over a bad ewe or a bad doe pretty quick. I can cull her and she can be gone. I bring in a bad buck or a bad ram that I've now bred to 100 or 40 or 50 of my animals, and there's a problem that rears its ugly head, I'm in big trouble. And so, you know, just something else to think about. But again, you know, that's a whole nother story, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I think most people aren't out there to screw people over. I don't want people to get that like, oh, I got to be really careful. You know, I don't think that's the case. I think 90% of the people are fine, and I think 10% of the people are 90% of your problems. But if you're an adult, you already know that anyways, you know. So it is what it is.
Hey, that's good. So Tim, if people want to find more about you, any plugs you want to put in?
Yeah, I would say check out our website. We're at www.linessafarms.com. So that's linessafarms.com. You can look us up on social media. You can also look us up on YouTube. We have some different information on there about various topics that we've talked about today. And maybe we can flip this sometime, and maybe you guys can come on with me. I'm interested in what you guys do, and how I'm always interested to hear the stories about how the heck did this happen, because those are always the most fun stories. So I'd love to have you guys on sometime, and maybe we can talk about what you do and how this came to be. So, but yeah, social media, linessafarms.com, YouTube, Facebook, and then of course our website as well.
Hey, sounds good. Absolutely. That would be fun to get together sometime and talk some more sheep stuff.
Yeah.
I will put links in the show notes to your website and your YouTube channel there so people can find you.
Sounds great.
And thanks a lot.
Yeah. It was nice seeing you guys. If you ever want to meet again, just give me a jingle and let me know.
Sounds good. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right, guys. Have a great day.
Yep.
You too. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again, folks, for listening to another episode of the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. I enjoyed this discussion with Tim from Lanessa Farms. It's always interesting to dig into topics with another producer. Also, just want to remind you that this call is sponsored by Lost Creek Wholesale. We are your universal feeder distributor, as well as your distributor for Schumer sheep and goat handling equipment. So if you're in the market for a saliva lick feeder, creep feeder, hay racks, spinning trims, fence line feeders, lambing pens, etc., feel free to check out our website, www.lostcreekwholesalellc.com. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank those of you who have reached out with feedback and comments on the content we've been putting out. If you like the content, do us a favor, leave us a rating and share it with your friends. We would greatly appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch up with you next time.